Nakia. All right, we're recording now. Thank you, Nakia. And I never take up too much time. I just want to formally welcome everybody who has signed in. Greetings on behalf of the University of Louisville. This is a collaboration between the Office of Diversity and Equity, Diversity Education and Inclusive Excellence, the President's Office, as well as the Alumni Office. I'm looking at some of these names, and some of you have been with us for every single community conversation. So thank you so much, and welcome back again. For many of you, wherever you are, it's probably raining or storming. I just want to tell you that's like the background music for this fabulous panel that we have. So they are thunder. So, in the spirit of that, there goes your music. And some of you are probably saying, you all say that about every panel. And I'm going to tell you, you're kind of right because we have had some amazing panelists during this community conversation series. So, thank you all so much for joining us. I also want to tell you before I pass it over to Nubia, we have selected our next book study for the 2022 year. We will be reading Dr. Joy DeGrew's Post Traumatic Slave Syndrome. We hope and hope and hope some more that you all will come back for that one. We'll follow a similar format where you can register to be an actual part of the book study cohort. And if you can't do that, again, you'll have these opportunities to participate in the community conversation. So, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the person who's really in charge, Nubia Bennett, who will introduce all of the panelists and we'll get started with this amazing conversation.
Hello, everyone. Let me get my life together while I get this slideshow started. Um, Swap it. All right. So, my name is Nubia Bennett, and I am the program coordinator for diversity, education, and inclusive excellence here at U of L. And I coordinate these community conversations which are a collaborative effort between the Diversity, Education, Inclusive Excellence Office of President Neely Bendaputi, the Senior Associate Vice President of Diversity and Equity, and Alumni Relations. I want to welcome everyone to our community conversation focused on failure, success, and survival. So, we have a lot of really cool things to talk about today. I want to first just give you a little bit of background for those of you who have never been to one of our virtual community conversations, or those of you who are returning, same information. But we did a total of 5 of these on different topics within the book, within Dr. Ibram X. Kendi's book, How to Be Anti-Racist, because we would like to move from conversation to action around anti-racism. Reading the book is not required for these community conversations, but because they were just a landing point, because there are so many people that are out here doing this work right now. So we're not starting from scratch. It's a reminder that we're starting and collaborating with each other where we are right now. But I did want to remind everybody that even though this is the last community conversation centered on Dr. Ibram X. Kendi's book, we are still giving away free copies, as we have, like, we'll pick some random folks and we'll send you out copies of the book. So even though this book wasn't required reading, we still give opportunities for everyone to be able to read the copy of the book. So look out for an email from me in case you are a winner, and we'll coordinate a way for you to get your book. I'd like to start, before we get started, I'd like to make sure that we have a shared understanding of just I call it alphabet soup, because we throw out a lot of words when we have these conversations, and they don't always mean the same thing to everybody. I think the good thing is that since the titles of the topics that we're going to be doing tonight, really failure, success, and survival, I want to leave it to the panelists to really define what that means, because that's not my job tonight. I'm just kind of holding it all together. But just a few words that I did want to make sure that we kind of talked about, because they came up a lot in the reading, was the definition of what an activist is, right? An activist is one who has a record of power or policy change. Post-racial, which is not something that a world that we're in, clearly not, is a having overcome or moved beyond racism, having reached a stage or a time at which racial prejudice no longer exists or is no longer a major social problem. Obviously, we need to definitely define what being a racist is, because that word is thrown around quite a bit. And that is one who is supporting a racist policy through their actions or inaction or expressing a racist idea. And to be clear, racism is racial prejudice and social and institutional power. So it's not just prejudice. It's not just one person saying, I don't like this kind of person. It's the power behind what that means. And then to be an anti-racist, you have to support an anti-racist policy through action and expressing an anti-racist idea. So we're not really interested in just not being racist, being non-racist, because that lends itself to defining itself as something someone doesn't have a racist idea, but that's inaction. So we are encouraging action and change. So that's why the emphasis is becoming anti-racist. So that's just kind of a foundation. Obviously, there are literal and figurative schools of thought on all of these things. So even in an hour and a half, we can't dive deep into everything because there's just too much information. This is a very complex thing. But I do have some phenomenal folks on this panel who can speak more to anti-racism in the work that they're currently doing in the community and in our world. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce who we have today, and then they're going to take the floor because I'm just here to learn along with everyone else. So first, we have Ms. Chantrice Martin, who is an abolitionist and mother living in Kentucky. She is the founder of Feed the West, a Black Lives Matter organizer and Speed Museum artist in residence. After studying food apartheid in Belize, Iceland, Mexico, Trinidad, and Tobago, and across the United States, she started Black Market Kentucky to address food insecurity. Chantrice has earned numerous awards, including 2021 Most Admired Woman, 2019 Louisville 40 Under 40, and the Coalition of Black Excellence Impact Award and the Silicon Valley Business Journal 2017 Women of Influence. We have with us State Representative Attica Scott, who began serving Kentucky House District 41 in January of 2017. She currently serves on the Education, Elections, Constitutional Amendments, and Intergovernmental Affairs, Natural Resources and Energy, and Judiciary Committees. Representative Scott graduated from the first class of Emerge Kentucky and serves on its advisory board. She was a featured Daughter of Greatness at the Muhammad Ali Center, graduated from the Bingham Fellows class of Leadership Louisville, is a Courier Journal Forum Fellow, and was featured in People to Watch in Louisville Magazine. Representative Scott was honored with the Miss Foundation for Women of Vision Award, is on the Essence Magazine list of Woke 100 Women in the United States. Higher Heights for America's Chisholm list of 50 Sisters to Watch, is a Rise to Run trailblazer. In 2021, she was recognized by Today's Woman magazine as the most admired woman in politics in Louisville, but her proudest accomplishment is being mom to Advocate and Ashanti. We have President Dr. President. I don't know which the order is the important order, right? Dr. Neely Bendapudi. As we all know, President Neely Bendapudi is the 18th president of the University of Louisville. She's selected by the U of L Board of Trustees in April 2018. Bendapudi came to Louisville from the University of Kansas, where she served as provost and executive vice chancellor. She earned her PhD in marketing from the University of Kansas and has teaching experience at Texas A&M University and The Ohio State University. President Bendapudi returned to Kansas University in 2011 to become the School of Business Dean and the H.D. Price Professor of Business. President Bendapudi specializes in the study of consumer behavior in service context. Her research deals with customers' willingness and ability to maintain long-term relationships with firms and with the brands and employees that represent them. Her research has been published in the Journal of Academic Medicine, Harvard Business Review, Journal of Marketing Research, Journal of Retailing, Journal of Service Research, and in the proceedings of various national and international conferences. Her work has been featured by popular media outlets, including the New York Times, CNBC, CNN, MSNBC, WebMD, and the Fox News Network. President Bendapudi sits on the board of directors of publicly held company Lancaster Colony Corporation and has sat on several nonprofit organization boards, including MRI Global, Independent Research Institute, and she's former Leadership Foundation Fellow of the International Women's Forum, one of the select group of women selected worldwide for this prestigious honor. And last but not least, definitely not least, we have Shamika Parrish-Wright, for whom education has always been a tool of empowerment in her life. After earning her degree in human resources from the University of Louisville, Shamika was offered an internship at the Kentucky Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, of which she is now co-chair. While serving in this role, she implemented a summer youth program to engage and inform youth on activism using art as a tool to change policy, make their voices heard, and fight for social injustice. Soon after, Shamika was appointed on the Human Relations Commission by the mayor of Louisville. Early in her career, Shamika also worked at the University in Louisville in the Arts and Sciences Department as a community outreach and voter engagement coordinator. Her work with the Kentuckians for the Commonwealth and a host of other community organizations gained her recognition as a bridge builder for increasing participation with families and youth of color from various backgrounds. Additionally, she has held and still holds leadership positions with many organizations such as Kentucky Jobs with Justice, La Casita Center Board, Continuum of Care Board of the Homeless Coalition, the Ann and Carl Braden Center, Memorial Center, Louisville Books to Prisoners Program, Justice Now, and Sowers of Justice Network. Currently, she serves as operations manager for the Bail Project, where she supervises and manages the Louisville, Kentucky, and Cincinnati, Ohio sites of a growing national organization. The Bail Project is a nonprofit organization designed to disrupt mass incarceration while providing community outreach, training, connections to wraparound services, and needs-based assessment. She is passionate about fighting daily. She's passionate about fighting daily. To the cash bail system and serves as a national motivational speaker discussing this and progressive family policy reforms. She's often forced to make very difficult life-changing decisions for individuals and her community under strict time constraints, and her ability to think under pressure is a necessary quality that she has mastered. This is our panel. So this is why I'm going to be quiet now, because we have a whole panel today. So I'm just going to be quiet and let them talk to us about failure, success, and survival as we all work to become anti-racist, work to create an anti-racist society. And we're gonna start with Chantrese, and I'm gonna let her go ahead and take the stage.
Well, hello, everybody. Wow. First of all, let me say thank you to Nubia and to everybody who helped put this together, Nakia. I mean, I'm intimidated myself with all the people who are on this panel. I've just seen so much amazing and really needed work done by women, done by Black women, done by women of color, Indigenous women in this city and nationally for the last year. And we've seen that before this year, but for some reason, I don't know why, now we're getting recognized. And so, you know, it's just great when the rest of the world catches on to what we have already known, which is that women can change the world, that Black women can change the world. And, you know, if you listen to us, good things happen. Yes, I want to shout out all the amazing people on this panel. You know, in reading, I've heard about this book in particular for so long. I even have the Antiracist baby book. And, you know, I just was like, okay, I probably don't have time to read an entire book, but I would love to learn about what he has to say. And I will say I disagree with a lot of things, but that's going to be the case. No one's going to get your philosophy exactly right. One thing that really struck me was this piece about behavior and about whether or not Black people can be racist. And I won't get too deep into it since this is an intro, but in my work over the last year, it's been just an amplification of what has been my work since I was old enough to know what a revolution was. And the common thread is that the people who are experiencing the trauma are the best to lead in dissolving or taking away that trauma. And historically, we've seen, especially in Louisville, that a lot of the decision makers have never experienced the bad thing. And I won't name people specifically, but there are some people who want to, for instance, solve houselessness. They want to solve the housing crisis. They want to solve eviction, but they've never had to rent. They've never had to wonder if they were going to pay for LG&E or water. They've never had to make those decisions. And so the policies they develop reflect someone who's never been in that position. A lot of times with Feed the West and with Black Market, I've had folks who tell me, like, I want to be in these programs. I want to go to a job fair. I want to go to these certification classes, but the TARC doesn't run that way. Or they're offering free transportation in the form of just parking vouchers. But if you don't have a car, which more than half of the households here don't have reliable transportation in the West End, but also in Berrytown, also in Newburgh, then that's not really breaking down a barrier. And also, Nubia, cut me off before I get on the soapbox and start preaching and evoke like Reverend Coleman or something. But I'm excited to think about, you know, me as someone who is a survivor in many ways, a survivor of assault, a survival of being Black in the United States, specifically being Black in Kentucky. Being an outspoken Black person in Kentucky just started trending. And so to survive that means that I have an intellectual responsibility to create space for other people. And as much as I hate public speaking, I know I'm on TV all the time, but I actually hate public speaking and get nervous every time. But I do that so someone who is dealing with an issue can have their voices amplified, can have their causes talked about. I mean, there are just literally spaces where people do not think about what poor people go through, what Black people go through. And part of being an anti-racist, even the parts I disagree with on the text, it's clear that it's about action. There can be no inaction if you are claiming to be an ally. Housing projects here, that's been torn down. Shepherd Square, that's been torn down. You know, we lived in Portland for a little while after we got Section 8. All these places have been torn down, destroyed, and moving place to place creates instability. It makes the child less likely to do well in school. It makes you less likely to succeed and believe in anything. And so when you have all that, it is no wonder why so many of us are behind and feel hopeless. And one thing that really excites me about this panel is that I've seen all these women work. I'm trying to be about action, not just about talk. And I know with some of the previous panels as well, there have been just these amazing activists, even if they don't call themselves that, who are changing the boardroom, changing the classroom, changing all these spaces where before we had to fight to even get in the door. I know Minda, who's been on one of these discussions before, has broken up several all-white panels, several all-male panels. You cannot, by the way, just a PSA, you cannot have a diversity panel with all white men. That's not a thing. And the fact that we still have to break those up in 2021 after the uprisings, after, you know, all that we've been through, means we have some work. We are living in a city where there has never been a Black mayor. There has never been a woman mayor. There has never been someone who looks like me in that position of power. And not to say if someone gets in that it's going to solve all the problems, but it is absolutely imperative for us to hit certain milestones. Hopkinsville has had a Black mayor. And I just shout out and love to Hopkinsville, Paducah, all these places outside of Kentucky, outside of Louisville in Kentucky that are actually more progressive than us in many ways. Although we like to tote that flag of being the most progressive and we act like we're not part of Kentucky. But in all honesty, we have a long way to go. And I get a little bit hyped thinking about just how much power there is. And in developing Black market, I've continued to see the power that we have. And that is one thing I agree with Dr. Kendi on, is that we have so much more power than we realize. We just have to come together and utilize that power, and then we will be unstoppable. We will be the benchmark for the nation if we can learn to trust and let Black women and women in general lead. And I'm gonna end it there. I feel like, I got a little off topic, a little preachy. So just forgive that Southern Baptist part of me that started springing forward.
Thank you, Chantrice. And we don't have to forgive that Southern Black Baptist tradition. I was here for it. I was sitting there starting to nod my head and snap my fingers and all of that too. So especially the part where we're talking about the people closest to the problems are closest to the solutions, because people know what they don't have. They know what they need and they know what they don't have. Thank you, Chantrice. If anyone has any questions about the process of how Chantrice started Black Market Kentucky and just even some of those things, please post them in the chat, because we are going to reserve time for all kinds of questions at the end of this. But we're going to move on to, I think we're going next to Attica. So we're going to let you go ahead and talk to us about failure, success, and survival, and I'm going to be quiet.
Okay. Where to begin? So I feel like there's very little to add to what Ms. Chantrice Martin shared, except to say that when I think about survival, I want us as Black people to be able to do more than survive. I want us to be able to thrive. So survival is like the floor for me. I want us up here, and I want us to be in all the places and spaces. I mean, as Chantrice was starting to list the cities in Kentucky that have had Black mayors, I thought of Bardstown, Kentucky, in Nelson County, which is mostly a rural county, and Bardstown has had a Black mayor. And so when we peel back the layers from Louisville, we begin to see that it's not the dream that has been sold to us. It is not this liberal bastion that we have been led to believe. And for far too long, I have to say that we have existed in this reality where far too many Black people have been led to believe that following people who don't care any bit about us is the way forward for us, is the best direction forward, when the reality is we need to follow and support one another, because we are all we got. We are the ones who are fighting for and with one another in ways that white people will never understand, could not possibly understand. They don't know about Parkland, where I live. Some people might come and plant trees and do a community cleanup, but you come and you leave in that same day. And so you're not here spending every single one of your waking hours here, knowing what it's like day in and day out, trying to get your neighbors food to eat, trying to make sure that people have transportation to jobs, trying to make sure that the children have access to after school and out of school time activities. That's our reality. So we have to do more than survive. We have to be able to thrive. When I think about failure, we all, I would imagine, have experienced failure. If you haven't experienced failure, then come talk to me, because I want to know how you did it, how you possibly made it through life without having experienced failure. For me, the key is learning from that failure that you experience, making the shift that you need to make so that you don't make that same mistake again, or that you don't have that same kind of failure again. There's going to be some other failures, but not necessarily that same one, because hopefully you've learned from those mistakes. And success to me is relative. Like what success looks like for me as an individual and for my family, for my kids, is not and should not look the same for you, because our realities are very different. Chantrice talked about the people being closest to the pain. And I know what it's like to sleep on Miss Shamika Paris Wright's couch with my children because my LG&E was cut off and my water was cut off. I know what it's like to serve with people in elected office who don't even know what a Brown bill is. And I was like, wow. That was mind blowing for me. I mean, more power to you, for real. But there's just a real disconnect if you don't even know what it is. Not saying you have had to have one, because I've had Brown bills before, but to not even know what it is, there's some real disconnect there that reminds me that you could never really understand if you don't know what it's like for people to receive that last bill before the utilities are cut off. So I look forward to our continued conversation, because I think there are ways that we can dig even more into this conversation. I'm with Chantrice on agreeing with Dr. Kendi on some things and not with others. I was schooled in the People's Movement Assembly and Highlander Center. And so when we start talking about Black people as racists and feeding into the system of institutional and systemic and structural racism, I step back for a minute, because I'm like, well, we don't run these institutions and systems and these structures. So let's have a real honest conversation and stop making white people feel comfortable by trying to say, well, it's us too, right? We don't have to make white people feel comfortable when it's white folks who have created these institutions and systems, and it's white folks who really need to do the work of dismantling them. So anyway, that's me, and I look forward to the rest of the conversation.
We'll see. I have to speak in between folks, and I forget that I'm a part of this conversation, and I'm not just listening. But thank you, Attica. And just this idea of transparency, right? Like being like, I understand exactly how this feels because this is my lived experience as well as my academic and political experience as well, and the importance of the role that plays. Now we are going to move, I think, Dr. President Bendapudi. Which one is first? I don't know which I'm supposed to say first. So I don't know what's appropriate. We're going to hold some space for you, and you can actually answer that question for me so I say that correctly.
You know what? I actually don't know. So just pick whichever one you want and I will answer. Excuse me. I just want to say how truly thrilled and honored I am to be on this panel. And you've invited an academic on this panel, so why don't I do that? You're hearing such wonderfully rich lived experiences and examples, which is exactly what we want to get done here. So here's what I will do in my 5 minutes, Nubia, is maybe try to provide for people. I'm so sorry, I'm an English major, this is what I do, I'm a professor. So I will try to lay out some big ideas that actually shed a lot of light on what Attica said and Chantrice said, and Shamika will say, I'm sure, Representative Scott. And I agree with any book, there are aspects you agree with and aspects you don't. But one of the things I like about this book is that it actually defines terms. A lot of times people use terms and you and I might be defining it very differently. So we don't know, or maybe we think we agree, but we just have different definitions in mind. So I always appreciate precision in thinking and saying, what exactly are we arguing about? So we know we are. So one of the basic things in the failure chapter is who is an activist? And I think that's an interesting definition. This particular author says, you are only an activist if you actually have a record of changing policy or power. So trying to say just by talking doesn't matter. You're not an activist, you've got to change. But I do see the point where you might argue and say, well, I'm not the one that's in power to change it. But it's an interesting thing to begin with. Nubia put that up. And in talking about failure, he talks about two arguments that have been made. One, and it's very common to say that the way for us to be anti-racist, he calls this the moral suasion argument, right? And this happened in the colonial structures all over the world. If only we could better ourselves, if only we are worthy, we prove that we are perfect and we've done everything right, then it will change and the powers that be will actually help to uplift us. The point that Dr. Kendi makes that I love is that that will always fail. We can never be good enough or prove to somebody in power that we are worthy and that it's too much pressure to put on ourselves. Why should any group be so perfect? So, you know how it is that, oh, they deserve justice because they're perfect. You know, that's not the way the world works. So I liked that one argument about why that fails when we're trying to do anti-racist work. A second argument he makes is that why anti-racism work sometimes stays with just words and doesn't move to action is that we think we need to change everybody's mind before we change policy. That we say we're going to work on it and get everybody on board before we move policy. And not that we all agree with this, but he makes a provocative argument that if you manage to change policy, that once people see that the benefits that they're gaining and that they shouldn't be as afraid of it as they might be, that would work. And he uses the example of Obamacare, that once, or the ACA, that people really were afraid of it before it passed, but that once it passed, they saw the benefits. And so that's an argument. It's not, again, something everybody is able to do, but makes those two interesting ideas. Then he really talks about how people doing anti-racist work have to acknowledge their failures too. I love what Representative Scott said, because that's what I tell people all the time. The trick is to say you won't make a mistake. Failure is not an option. That's a good movie line, but it's nobody's life that I know. The trick is not to make the same mistake again and again. So he talks a lot about how people that are doing the anti-racist work and want to build those coalitions, because there's power, there's true power, but it's only when we combine and work together that we need to say, when are we not succeeding? What is not succeeding? And try to really figure out what changes the power dynamics. So the argument is that sometimes in anti-racist work, we are so caught up in complete purity. And so we don't do something. Like, you got to be ideologically pure. If I don't get 100% of it, I'm not going to do it at all. And the argument he makes is people are living and dying now. They're suffering now. So maybe what we need is to make change. If we don't give up the full ideals, but that we have to keep making change and not just, this is a dig at academics. That's what he's doing, where a lot of times he says, as professors, we care more about whether you're using the right words than about whether you're making change. So that people on the front line that are doing the work need to do it, even if they're not completely ideologically pure, as he says. On success, I would say the big thing you may want to take away is he poses this theory of, is racism a cancer, a disease, or is it an organ of the body? Which one is it? And tries to say that there is possibility. If it's an organ in the body, then that's going to be much harder to fight. So his argument is it's a cancer and it can be treated and it can be worked on. And the big argument in the success argument is that people are not racist because of hatred or bigotry. That's certainly true for some, but that really what we want to focus on is power, that it's self-interest, that change happens when people realize that change is hard. No one wants to change, right? Even if it's bad, what do we tell ourselves? Even if it's a bad situation, we say, oh, better the devil we know than the devil we don't know. We are afraid of change. So his argument is, it's not about hatred, that's certainly there, but that's not the big problem we need to tackle. We need to tackle systems that are in place, that are perpetuating this. And the way to do that is that the powerful have to realize their own interests are better served if they change. So he gives example after example of when successful change has come. On the survival chapter, I can say nothing about it because you cannot read it and not cry. I mean, the things that this young couple goes through, it is painful, it's extraordinary. And so for them, with both husband and wife having the health challenges they do, with a 2-year-old child, they talk about, and I get it, sometimes to survive is incredible success. because you never know where that person is, right? You don't know where they are. Those are some themes. And to me, what I liked is sometimes I'm fully aware of the structures within which I operate, but I'm always going to push for change. And actually, Miss Marion was my inspiration 2.5 years ago. So well before any of this, we at the University of Louisville signed up for anti-racism. I signed on to the pledge of the CEOs, the CEO Action Forum. I'm bringing that up because it's a great example. So CEOs who are saying we need to change the world are not doing it just because of the pureness or goodness of their hearts. They are realizing that in their own best interest, they do better if they can have a diverse workforce, if they can have racial justice, equity, etc. I'll stop. I'm happy to go on and on because it raises phenomenally interesting questions for leaders. But I enjoyed it very much, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate today.
Thank you, President Bindapudi. President came out first. This idea of participating, I mean, it's a lovely idea, thinking about participating and resisting at the same time, and looking at the structures, because those exist regardless of who's in charge, and that definitely gives so much space for so many good questions to come out of that. And now I'd like to move to Shamika Parrish Wright, so she can talk more about failure, success, and survival. And I would encourage everyone to put their questions in the chat as we continue listening.
Thank you, Nubia. I am honored to be here and follow these amazing women who I see doing the work every day in their way. Shantice Martin, you know, even every time I see you, you're on to something, doing something more. State Representative Scott, you know, we get it out the mud together, and it's gonna keep rolling. President Bindapudi, I remember being in your office and you speaking and talking about the changes that you were bringing to the university, and now seeing some of those things play out. I encourage you to keep going, and thank you for that. I'm usually just speaking off the head, but I wrote a little bit, I posted about my reflection on the book. I agree with the women before me. There were some great points around how the work around anti-racism intersects. There's also different approaches to the work. And so that's why I think I'm a good person to come last, because my kids call me a mixer, but I'm all about intersectionality and bringing people together from all walks of life, and also having a Black agenda, but also recognizing that it's going to take all of us to get to a better direction. And my reflection on the book is that it would be nice if all of us could just focus on one thing, but being poor, Black, brown, white in America, you can't just focus on one thing. You have to be intentional in all you do. And unfortunately, we can put blinders on, but if we want to move from surviving to thriving, we have to take them off and pay attention to what's around us and how the institutions have perpetuated the things that we're fighting against every day. And sometimes there are employers, and sometimes they quiet our voice, and sometimes we have to move in better positions so that we can do more and do it right. So my reflection is capitalism in America has done a good job at convincing people from all backgrounds to put their head down and work hard to achieve the American dream. The truth is, none of us are free until we all are free from racist practices and many of the isms. Yes, you get a quality of life when you're fighting for social justice, but you have to create it. We can and will not buy our way out of this mess. But with the ballot box, we can ensure real change through people power. We have to elect intentional and inclusive listeners as leaders that take action. Too many missing voices at tables where life decisions are being made. Fear and insecurity got us here. To be anti-racist, you must be willing to sacrifice something and be complicated enough to do what's right again and again, consistently. The other America, the late greats speak of, this post-racial world that we dream of, we only get there if we do that together, if we all do our part. I try to make sure that everything that I do is connected to doing my part and to bringing more people to the fold, because the argument that morals will get us there, like Dr. Benaputi spoke about, that's a distraction. To be sustainable, we have to talk about where these issues connect. We have to talk about how racist policies are perpetuated. And we have to talk about that there's a difference in what failure, success, and survival looks like on every corner in America. So I just wanted to start with that, and hopefully as we talk, I can talk about some solutions I've seen happen over the years right here in Louisville, Kentucky, some ways I've seen white people and rich people take action and do their part, some ways that I see them pushing their white fear to the side and addressing this, and how powerful it is to be an advocate, and how much you carry as a poor Black person. We are connected, and even with all the historical gains, there's been so many things that have carried on generation after generation. Last I'll leave you with is that Dr. Blaine Hudson, who hired me to do some outreach work, would say to me, because I would say, I feel like I got to prove myself to everyone. I got to prove my Blackness because I have relationships across lines of difference. And he would say, Shamika, it's not that. It's you make people uncomfortable because that uncomfortableness represents change. He said, I remember when I made people uncomfortable at the University of Louisville, and I remember the change that happened as a result. So he told me to keep pushing, meet people where they are, and never give up. Thank you.
And of course, you dropped the mic with a beautiful quote from, Dr. J. Blaine Hudson. So that was wonderful. Thank you, Shamika. Now, before we open up the floor for questions from audience questions and questions among each other, I did want to ask, because we want to make sure that we are moving this conversation from just conversation to action. And because it's not that often that we have just the diversity even of the kinds of people on this panel, like you all are involved in so many different ways. I'd like you all, each of you, to speak to some action items in your respective areas that we can do, that whether you're talking about white people, Black people, what can we do to support your work? Tell us more about some anti-racism work that you're doing. We want to know about y'all. I mean, this book is great and it's a great starting point, but we didn't bring this is not just a book discussion. This is a conversation that moves to action in as many ways as possible. So whoever wants to start, the floor is yours.
Because I chickened out earlier and refused to go first, I was so nervous. So I'll go first this time. I'm serious, people. I was like, you cannot put me with these three amazing women and have me say something. I'll share some of the things we've done, and I really want all of you to help, because when we talk about doing change, because it helps everybody, I believe in it. I really believe that this will help everybody, that all of us benefit. I recommend Heather McGhee's book too, that shows how racism impacts everybody negatively. And it's disproportionately impacts the poor, Black, queer at the intersections, but the idea is that it hurts everybody. We're better off if we can truly work together. Some of the work we've done, I would say is, for me, my cabinet, I'm really proud. And I'm just telling you all, I have obviously not checked all 130 R1 universities, but I truly believe my cabinet, my senior leadership team, is probably the most diverse that I know of. I'm sure there's others that I don't know, but that's been important because that's the message I heard from all of you, that you need people who have that lived experience, not just well-meaning people who are trying to understand. Why not just have people who have that lived experience? A second thing that's been really important to me is health equity. So our whole acquisition of Kentucky One Health, the reason I never gave up and fought so hard for it is the disproportionate impact it could have had on Black and brown people, because we were the safety net hospitals. And so what would happen if that didn't happen? So examples of some things that we've done, or the cultural center that we agreed to do without the donation, I said, it doesn't matter. We've promised students we'll do that. So how can you all help the university? So many ways. So as we are trying to think about how do we put our arms around our students, our faculty and staff who are bearing the disproportionate brunt of this. There's another excellent book, Bandwidth Recovery. You don't have to read the book. Here's the idea. I think Representative Scott put it so well. When people are dealing with so many other issues, to say, well, why don't you have time to read this book? Other people have, is just not fair. Like, what can we do to give the bandwidth back to people? What can we do to support them? That's going to be very important. We are really emphasizing this in our research agenda. You'll all see lots of calls for the community to participate. I hope you'll do that. So your time, your talent, your treasure, your ideas, any way you can support our anti-racism agenda. Put your arms around our I know I'm using ableist language. That's not what I'm trying to do, but our faculty, staff, and students of color. Whatever you can do there, that's really what we desperately need. I hope I understood your question, Nubia. Okay.
No, that was exactly right. Because we want this to be on the ground in terms of what can we do right now. So yes, thank you.
I'll jump in. Oh, I see you, State Representative Scott. I would say my newest grandson is in the background. But I would say the intentionality that we all have been speaking on comes by showing up. When we say stand with Black women, protect each other by showing up and being there. And I know it's awkward if you haven't done it before. There are groups who are doing great work around training. I think of my favorite anti-racism, of course, my mentor, Ann Braden, but also people like Tom Moffitt, who his biggest contribution was showing up at events and putting his fist in the air and say, we need change. That the fist in the air matter too, but supporting the people who have to work on the inside of these institutions means that we have to have organizations that are willing to train people to be racial transformers. One of the things I do is travel, and I do trainings on how to speak up, how to say something when you see injustice. And I know it's hard for people because they feel threatened. I think that groups like Louisville Showing Up for Racial Justice are doing a great job at training white people to how to deal with that. And you won't get there by trying to shame people. You get there by putting people to work and teaching them how to take action so that they can teach others how to take action. I tell the people in the comments, and sometimes it's late and I just get lost in the comments, that it's your children that are out there with us, your young people. When we were out in the streets for the Justice for Breonna Taylor movement, in many ways, the young people get it better than some of us, and I'm 44. Sometimes we get so comfortable and complacent that we got our jobs and we are okay, that we forget that other America won't come if we think we're just going to go to work and go home. So I think joining efforts that are happening, paying people. I saw someone in the comments say that, how do we get more people involved in the communities with direct lived experience? Get them involved. Don't make it trauma porn. Ask them to share and pay people for their time. Just as you would pay an expensive consultant to come in, you should be willing to pay people with direct lived experiences the same way. I think universities, people will listen to you way more than they'll listen to any of us, right? And so it's your jobs to speak out and to bring those people, because I believe in organic intellectualism as well as academia. And I believe they both do better when they're learning, when it's reciprocated on, and it's a two-way street. Too many times we have studies and all these experiments on the communities that we live and serve in, and then that information is not brought back to them so that they can use it to make their situation better. All the studies on the West End, and right now, as I speak to you, the Algonquin Park is closed, a place where youth can go and swim. It doesn't have adequate equipment. It doesn't have lifeguards, and there's no reason that that should be happening, you know? And so it takes us to speak out. And I tell you all, for this Justice for Breonna Taylor movement, for once in my life, I wasn't homeless. I was homeless on these streets 2 times in Louisville. And for once in my life, by working at the Bail Project, I knew my work would intersect. But I also had just been elected as co-chair of the Kentucky Alliance. And I said to my other co-chairs that it is our job as one of the oldest civil rights organizations to be out here in the streets with our young people, with all our seasoned people, everyone that was out there, and help solidify this base, because they won't run through us the same way. And so that's how I saw many departments from U of L and all the area colleges come and participate, but also many groups and startups. And since then, more businesses and things have come of that. That movement has been so powerful, but it was powerful because of coming together, the intersectionality of all our issues, that if we think Breonna went home, Breonna did things the right way, Breonna wasn't in the streets hanging out, she was at home. And so if they came and kicked down her door, it will come to us. If we think that we can just be quiet and just worry about our own, then we are sadly mistaken. And so I tell even my husband, that who was a blue collar worker and works as a crane operator, and the movement came to his door because he's there, and a 3%er came to him and said, I'm a 3%er and we're not really racist. And my husband had never encountered a 3%er. And a lot of times some people follow these notions in ignorance because they don't know what they all represent. The tattoos look cool, or they see people dressed up. But I was in those streets when those same racist people shot at us many times for being right there at Injustice Square. And so we need you all to do your part. I know that everybody can't write an op-ed letter. You might be putting yourself in a situation, but think about the sacrifices people are making. And so you have to be willing to make a sacrifice, whatever that is, even if it's at your family turkey dinner and you hear somebody saying something racist, you have to speak up, you have to say something. That is the problem. The silence it continues and perpetuates the violence. So that's what I would add to it. Become a racial transformer, share and be trained to do so. Reach out to Marion. I love Marion, and she's brought amazing groups to the Bail Project, but also to other things that I've been a part of. She's an awesome trainer. A lot of you on here, I've met you through trainings. We have to teach people, and we have to meet people where they're at. If we're not willing to do that, then we won't bring the real change that we seek. My last point is, for me, I feel like we're going to always be fighting racism and racist practices and policies and things like that because they're so baked into the systems. But a direct way we can take action is by fighting poverty. And that's why I do the work at the Bail Project. That's why I do the work with the Homeless Coalition. I do the direct aid. And so even if you can't do anything else because of your position, go out and do something about poverty. Feed somebody, do what Feed the West and Black Mark and all of them are doing. Join those efforts, support, and donate. We can't buy our way out of there, but money is a tool to use to spread the message. So that's my last point. Thank you.
I'll chime in and say that for me, I feel Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley when she says that policy is my love language. Everyone can get involved with policy. And when I hear people say that they're hesitant to speak up or take action because of their positions, their roles, to me, that's you supporting racism. That's you supporting Asian hate, that violence against Asian people. That's you, supporting immigrant children being in cages because you decided that your positional privilege was much more important than our humanity. My son walked away from his job a couple of months ago because there were only 2 Black people there, him and another young Black man, and everyone else was white. And they would every single day share racist jokes. Someone shared about the date he went on with an Asian woman and how stereotypical he was. And after a while, my son was like, I can't take this anymore. I'm not going to stay here. All you white people are listening and laughing, even the human resources person, and not speaking up and not saying something. And so the Black person, the one of 2 Black people, had to leave instead of the multiple white people speaking up and saying, that's enough. We are not going to stand for that. So at some point, you're going to have to ask yourself, is your positional privilege worth watching people struggle and suffer and have the neck of oppression and racism, the foot of oppression and racism on their necks. I'll also say that every single person, I believe, can take some kind of action. Armchair activists can call or email their elected officials. You probably won't reach that person. I'm gonna just be honest with you. You're probably gonna reach their assistant. So call or email. And those folks are absolutely amazing. They're gonna take your message and relay it. If you email somebody, that's so passive. Like you're emailing, right? You're not in a face-to-face conversation. So send that email, do something. Because sitting on your hands is not going to make a difference. And this question is actually pretty exhausting for me because I feel like over and over again, especially some of us as Black women, we answer this question time and time again, and it still feels like people don't listen. It still feels like people continue to do the same thing they've been doing. Shamika and I often talk about, when people are asked, what would you have been doing if you were in the civil rights movement? You'd be doing what you're doing right now. And if that is nothing, that's what you would have been doing during the civil rights movement. So, take some action, step up. If you're white, get involved with Louisville showing up for racial justice. We know we can't train our way out of this, but what we can do is make sure that white folks are holding one another accountable, not making excuses for one another, not being afraid to say that we do need to truly rethink where we're putting our money, that it doesn't have to constantly go into policing, that it needs to go into the needs of our neighbors across the city of Louisville, and be willing to be bold and brave, because the reality is we often have more to lose than you do. We are usually the first ones gone to be kicked out of a job because we spoke up, and you're usually much safer than we are. So speak up, use your positional privilege.
Oh, okay. Fire. So I'm gonna possibly misquote our newest Black mayor in the country, which is Mayor Tashara Jones in St. Louis. She's the first Black mayor. She ran on a defund police campaign. That woman, okay, let me not fangirl. I'm gonna pause that feeling. But she said to one of the other, political leaders, you're chasing clout and I'm chasing change, right? There's all these people who ask a question like this because they want to be on Instagram like, I was at Feed the West volunteering, y'all, look. That's not what this is about. The 2017 Health Equity Report, that's the most recent one. They're working on the next one. It showed that people in the West End tend to live a decade shorter than people in the East End, an entire decade. So when the COVID vaccine first came out and they said, okay, people 65 and older get to get it first. We don't even live that long. We don't even live to 65 to have access to some of these medical innovations, right? When you look at a lot of the health disparities, some of it comes from food and access. We have we being Louisville, in the East End, there is one major grocer per 12,000 people. In the West End, it is one major grocer per 25,000 people. Every day in my inbox, I have people sending me video and pictures of Kroger here in the West End where there's rotten food on the shelves, expired food. I just came from Kroger. Even though I own a grocery store, I have to still shop at Kroger because it is the only major grocer, right? And I saw expired almond milk. If you drink almond milk, you bougie like me, you know that almond milk, the one on the shelf, takes a long time, like 2 years to expire. So the fact that they had expired almond milk on the shelf means they really don't care. And it's not the workers. We know managers there who are on the Feed the West list because they cannot afford with their salary to get groceries and pay rent and take care of their children. So it is not the workers. I don't want y'all to fall for the corporate tricks. Corporate gets to decide what comes from their warehouses on the trucks to the locations. The managers in the West End don't have the decision-making power to do that. And I say all that because when we talk about what you can do, it's amplifying that. Last year, we put out the Bok Choy Project, BOKCHOY, Bok Choy Project. And this was a simple photo essay where we worked with some of our interns Nicole Funk was the photographer, to put out just pictures of the difference. And we went there for weeks, the same day, the same time of day. We asked them, what day does your produce come in? So that Kroger could put their best foot forward. And you know what? There were empty shelves, there was expired stuff, wilted stuff. And after we put out the Bok Choy Project, instead of them saying, you know what, we messed up, how can we fix it? They just put some old Bok Choy out. They didn't label it. I went because I live in the West End. I live in Representative Scott's area, right? And I took the wilted and gross looking bok choy to the front. They didn't even know what it was. It wasn't even in the computer. Okra, that's one thing. A lot of us who grew up Southern eating soul food, okra is a big staple. Many a grandma has used okra, right? But in the West End, until last year, none of them carried it. We talked directly with workers. The Portland Kroger had never, the man said, never carried okra. So when we talk about what you can do, I use that as the background, but here's the action steps. I want y'all to have pen and paper or your tablet, whatever you need. First thing is blackmarketky.com. Sign up for our newsletter. We put out racial justice actions every single month, specific things you can do. The next thing coming up is July 10th from 12 to 2 at Black Market at 2313 West Market. We are having a volunteer day. You will canvass going door to door, asking people what they need. Black Market has done eviction prevention. We have paid people's utility bills. We have fed people. We do more than just feed people. Even though it's an LLC, we give away way more than we sell. So again, that is July 10th from 12 to 6 p.m. We will have a volunteer day. Everyone is welcome. We're working with U of L medical students who were a big part of our volunteer force last year. The second thing is that bok choy project that I mentioned earlier. That's something we put together with no money and a little team. We want a full report, right? There is the health equity report and they're doing great work, but we also want to have something that can be easily digested by the average person so that the CEO of Kroger, who makes $11.7 million a year, cannot deny what is happening because their MO is just to ignore us. I went on I think it was a 12-day hunger strike last year, and their corporate partners advised them to just wait it out because if I got sick or died, it would no longer be an issue. So again, the Bok Choy Project, if you are an academic, you are a researcher, you're a really good photographer, we need you to help us make the Bok Choy Project bigger than what we have. It's a little 10-page report, and it's on the Change Today, Change Tomorrow website and the Root Cause Research Center website. The third thing is this week, June 24th at 4:30, we will be having a rally around the budget. We've had hundreds of people write on the budget comment form asking to reduce the police budget, asking for the deflection program to be removed from the police because they've already admitted, and I watched Chief Shields say this herself, the police are not equipped to handle it, they don't want to handle it, and deflection, as someone as a survivor of assault on campus, the police did not help me. The police made me feel like it was my fault and I was mistaken. We don't need that type of interaction for someone who's just been victimized. And so we're using that June 24th rally to change the narrative and make sure that the city cannot ignore us because we've had hundreds of comments on their official budget form. And there are loads of organizations. Shamika mentioned L-Surge, which is Louisville Showing Up for Racial Justice. There's also Black Lives Matter Louisville. There's Take the Seat by Hannah Drake. There's all these organizations because we are not doing this alone, regardless of whether we agree with every single thing everybody does. We are powerful. And that's one thing, like I said, I go back to, yes, I disagree with parts of Dr. Kendi's work, but one thing I know is that we are powerful, right? And so the last thing I'll say, I know I didn't hit y'all with a whole lot. The last thing I'll say is that if you are in a position where you don't have to worry about the cost of milk, you don't have to worry about if the TARC is running on time, I highly suggest you go to our website and buy a bundle for another family. We have several white folks in the East End who every week they buy a veggie bundle. They don't need it. They have a Whole Foods in their community. Some of them garden and farm their own food, but they buy a Feed the West bundle for $25 every week so that a veggie bundle so that families here in the West End can get fresh, healthy produce from Black farmers. Because the cycle of food injustice is not just what you get at the store. Black farmers are being left out of the conversation. Black vendors are being left out of the conversation. Indigenous and vendors of color. There's also women farmers who are ignored. And so we want to make sure that every step of injustice, we are injecting ourselves to make sure we change this. So again, the three things are July 10th from 12 to 6 at Black Market. Anyone who can work with our Bok Choy project, whether you're a researcher, you just have money you want to throw at us, that's always great. You want to hit up blackmarketky.com, and to email me directly, it's blackmarketky@gmail.com. I do have a couple interns, but it's usually just me answering. So I say we a lot, but I mean we the people, but it's me, Chantrice, answering. And then the rally on June 24th, and that is specifically to reduce the police budget so we can have Algonquin Park and Pool be kept up to the same standards as our East End pools. I know that Councilwoman Dorsey is working on this. We have all these council folks who are working so hard in the West End, but they don't have enough resources. Many of us can't even get speed bumps. And it's not because, you know, we haven't followed the rules. And so we take it upon ourselves at Black Market, not just to be a grocery store, we are a community incubator. And so those are the three concrete things you can do. And again, if you sign up for the newsletter, blackmarketky.com, you'll get, when we have volunteer days, when there's rent assistance, like if you yourself are not in a position to advocate, but you have a need, like you need food, you need transportation, we provide that with no judgment and there's no application. You sign up, you say, you have a West End address, we will drop off the food, no questions asked, because we understand that that application process oftentimes is also a barrier. If you, with your 3 kids, have to go on the TARC to a place that's an hour away, take your ID, take this, that, and the third, and then wait for someone to call you back, that is a barrier. And so we want to break down those barriers. So yeah, that's my little stuff for today. Again, if you email me or sign up, you're going to get all this. And I see Shamika's posting some really bomb resources. I just talked to Stacia at Hope Bus. Like this is not a disorganized thing where we're all just doing random things. We are working collaboratively to be anti-racist, and it is an ongoing thing and it is action-based. So I encourage anyone who has not already done something to get on board. Like the train is leaving the station, y'all. Let's make this happen.
Woo. Okay.
Listen,
Marion, I was getting ready to give you the floor. I mean,
Okay.
you go ahead and just take it. Or
I was just jump in. This panel said you will not hang up today and ask what can you do. You will have plenty to do. So don't email us saying what else can I do. There's a year's worth of action there. Before we jump into Q&A, I do want to quickly let you all know that Neely has to leave. It is not due to any lack of commitment to this conversation. Neely has to go fight and continue the good work for the University of Louisville. So there's a meeting that she's already running late for, but she committed to staying here with us. So I'm going to jump into a couple of questions that were submitted previously. And I want to start with the question, what's the best way to influence a coworker that they are racist, but they don't seem to think so? How do you get them engaged in diversity or anti-racism training?
I want to say this. If they don't think they're racist, ain't too much you can do, boo. What you want to do is document. I've had many a job where, you know, all the Black people or all the women complain about this one person or this one policy, and we just talking around the water cooler or at the lunch table, but we don't actually put anything into practice. So document, if they're telling racist jokes, like Representative Scott said, if they are, you know, saying things that are inappropriate, document. At this time, on this date, in this room, here's who was in there, here's exactly what they said, quote it, act like you on Facebook, just doing whatever, and quote them. And then put that in the report. And yes, there are some HR departments that will say, well, we can't really do anything about that. But without documentation, policy does not move. So I would say that at the point where you said, hey, that was racist, or hey, that was anti-Semitic, or whatever it may be, and they just continue the behavior, that's the point where you disengage from that person, stop wasting your energy, start documenting, submit that to HR. If it gets to a point where HR is complicit, I would say take it further than that. Go to their donors or supporters and say, hey, I noticed y'all donated $1 million to this company. Did you know that they're making sexually explicit comments about Asian women? And you don't have to always elevate it to social media. Sometimes a nice little polite email to the right person, with the vague threat of social media blasting, will help you get what you need. Because if someone does not believe they're racist and they've continued that behavior, no amount of training is going to convince them otherwise. And I don't want to say, you know, just go for the punitive immediately. Like if you have talked to them, you have tried, and they're still on some, you know what, my behavior may be racist to you, but I'm gonna keep doing it. After that, don't waste your energy. I would say go straight to documenting and then submit it to where it needs to go based on the policies you all have at whatever department you may be in.
Okay, it looks like.
Oh, no, I was just going to chime in with two responses. One is, I think it's really important for you to build your base of support. So it's a compliment really to what Chantrice just said about documentation. You also got to build that base of support, your network, your community at work, or whatever that environment is. It might be at your place of worship, whatever environment it is, might be at your school. Make sure you get that base of support of people who have your back and you have their back, so that it's not one person going, it's multiple people going together. And like Chantrice says, sometimes even multiple people don't get heard. But that gets me to my second point, which is I believe in matching energy. So I love you, Chantrice. You know I love you, Chantrice. But sometimes you got social media as a tool, and sometimes you have to use it. I know I used to be called the Twitter Grim Reaper, because if somebody comes for me, I'm coming right back at them. But I'm trying to grow and be a better person. So I haven't done that in the past year, but unless it's really egregious. And people believe that because I'm a Black woman, they could say anything, and I'm just supposed to take it. So sometimes you have to let them know. But I will say that in 2019, one of my colleagues in Frankfurt stood on the House floor to get a resolution passed, and it was passed, that said the most disgusting, demeaning, awful things about people who are immigrants. And then not only did he have the entire resolution read, he then stood on the House floor to go on for maybe 15 to 20 minutes to reinforce the hurtful and harmful things that he was saying. And so I immediately went to Twitter and posted about it, and his little feelings got hurt. And, he asked if we could sit down and talk about it. We certainly can. And I brought my leadership and Representative Nima Kulkarni, who is the first and only Indian immigrant to serve in our state legislature, because she was hurt by that, because she is an immigrant, as is her family. And so we sat down and had a conversation with him, and I made it clear to him, I'm going to match your energy. You stood on the House floor for everyone in Kentucky who chose to watch, to hear what you had to say. So I went to my public platform to call you out about something that you know was awful and should never have been introduced in the first place. So sometimes you have to use all of the tools at your fingertips, because I know if I had only gone to leadership in the House, there would have been nothing that was done or said. I know this by experience. So I'm not going to keep doing the same thing over and over again when it doesn't work. So sometimes you do have to take it to that next level, whatever that next level may be. If history has shown you, instead of doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same results, if history has shown you that one effort is not going to work, you have to try another effort.
Okay. So my next question is actually two-part. How do you make your transformative justice and anti-racist work sustainable? And how do you take care of yourself? So how do you practice self-care doing this work?
Are any of us really enacting all the self-care we can? Because I
was going to say, I can answer part of that question. I'm working on the self-care every day. I do take more time and take naps and things like that, and just kind of pull away when I can. Sustaining it means that what State Representative Attica Scott talked about is having a check-in partner or an accountability group that you just check in and you run things by, because, sometimes, dealing with this work so much, it's trauma filled, or it can make you can feel your heart turning hard or being bitter, and you don't want to operate from that place. I think that place is where all this white fear and all these other things that people struggle with come from, and it just only perpetuates that in the end. So what I try to do is make sure that I'm pulling out and I'm checking in with my accountability partners in my circle. I take 3 vacations a year. I take one with my husband and one with my family, because I be praying to the ocean that the ocean don't take one of my kids. So that's not really a vacation. And then I take one with my girls. And so I'm working on taking one just by myself. I've raised kids since I was 15. I've never been anything alone. And now I have 3 grandkids and 6 children. So for me, I don't get a lot of alone time. So sometimes I'm in the park and I'm in the driveway so that I don't bring the work into my home. The kids know that I debrief, kind of talk about things, and maybe play music and maybe yell, maybe scream, maybe text. And then I come in and I just, because they don't care what I've been through when I walk in these doors, right? So I think you know, you have to find what brings home to you, and you have to create that in every space that you have. But the transformative work, it's ongoing. I go to trainings. I talk, because even if you've been doing this work, you know, Black people can't be racist, but we can become privileged and we can be insulated sometimes. And where we're always around our yes people, or always around people who just pump us up and tell us we're doing a good job. And then meanwhile, we've made somebody else feel like crap. And so it's good to constantly, I believe nobody, I don't care how many degrees you got, how long you live, nobody is above professional or personal development in my eyes. So I think that we should always seek out new learnings, new ways to do things, challenge ourselves and be challenged. I have a team now that I drive them crazy and they drive me crazy, but we get to go back and forth and I get to learn from them. And I never want to be somebody who didn't listen. So for me, it's about being a better ancestor by listening and being that Shamika needed when she was younger.
Anybody else want to tackle that? How do you take care of yourself?
Oh, I don't want to tackle that part because I am trying to be better at it. But I would like to say how we make it sustainable, right? For me, it's about building bench strength. I like the fact that I do talk about this at every leadership meeting, and sometimes it might get, people might say why, but I want it to be part of the culture. So for every search committee, every meeting, I think that's important so that it becomes part of what we say and what we do. The other answers so far were so spectacular. In terms of, I guess I will talk about taking care of me, is that I have not done a good job of that, I will confess. A lot of it has to do with this moral suasion that he talked about, which is, it's a generational thing too, is that you need to be twice as good and work twice as hard and prove to everybody. And, I'm hoping that I actually put it down as a goal, is that we all have to realize this is going to be a marathon. This is not a sprint. I truly used to think it would be a sprint, that if we work extra hard, surely this will happen. And then we have to realize there's a history, it took a long time. And so we all need to pace ourselves. For me as a leader, I am trying my best to make sure that my team takes some time this July. So I will share with you, this idea came from a team member, not from me, where we said in July, can we reduce the number of regularly scheduled meetings? Because my day is super scheduled, as is probably yours, to say, if it's an emergency, we still will touch base. But because people worked so hard through the pandemic and beyond, that we need to just give each other and give ourselves a little grace. But I'm all about making sure it gets to be part of the culture. That's my fear. It cannot be just one person. It needs to become part of the culture.
I'm terrible at self-care, so I'm just, whatever y'all said is probably best. But I've often been forced to go have fun. But let me say that I do have a therapist. So that is my self-care, even though I barely take time for myself. I do that. Dr. Candace is amazing. But on the sustainability side, I would say that money first and infrastructure. And sometimes infrastructure has to come first. Sometimes money has to come first, so you have the capacity to build infrastructure. But just like how our streets are messed up in the West End, a lot of our organizations are messed up. We don't have the infrastructure because we made it in a moment of reacting to something so we could survive. So Feed the West is a great example, right? Like, people didn't have a way to eat when Kroger closed. And so we literally just asked people as they were walking through the parking lot, hey, do you have food? Can I get your number? We'll get you a lift home, because it was June, it was hot. But we was just like getting food to people. There was no structure. And then we made some structure as we were going through it. And similarly, a lot of these very well-intentioned groups and individuals are reactive because we have to be. And then, now it's a year after the uprisings, over a year after uprisings, and many of us don't have structure because we were stuck in survival mode. So I would say funding and infrastructure are absolutely essential if we're going to sustain this work, because it is still needed. I know a lot of people have forgotten about Breonna Taylor, have forgotten about David McAtee, even Shelby Gazaway and all these other folks, even Jamarcus Glover, who they tried to, turn on Breonna and tried to have him lie and say she was a drug kingpin, right? People forget about these names, but the work goes on. That's something we still need to be doing. And without funding and infrastructure, you're going to have a bunch of people who don't know how to take care of themselves or feel like they have to always perform and always act. My iPhone told me I get about 3.5 hours of sleep a night. That is not sustainable. So we need to create infrastructures where we can do the basic things we need to do in order to thrive, not just survive, as someone mentioned earlier. So, yeah.
So, Chantrice, we're going to go walk the bridge, and we're going to talk about this people forcing you to have fun. I don't understand the concept. So we're going to make a date. We're going to go walk the bridge. So that's part of my self-care is, I love to walk the bridge. Most folks who know me know that's my happy place. And I also, after being tear gassed last year and our false arrest, I began seeing a therapist as well. I was forced into it because of the trauma that we experienced at the hands of police here in Louisville. And, the person that I'm seeing is a therapist and coach and has been absolutely amazing. And I'm grateful that I'm able to see someone and get the support that I need. Sustainability is, again, that for me is one of those issues that's relative, because yes, like Chantrice said, organizations need that infrastructure, that financial support. Sustainability for individuals, for me, looks like people stepping away when they need to step away. You don't have to force yourself to stay in situations and positions and places that are not healthy or that have worn you out or worn you down. Step away as you need to step away. Take a break, a breather. When you're ready to come back in the way that's best for you and healthiest for you. Because if you're not healthy, you're not going to be healthy to other people. You're going to bring that pain and that trauma to situations where you're inflicting pain and trauma on other people, not because you even have an issue with them per se, but because you have things that are unresolved within yourself and in your life. So for me, that's part of that sustainability is stepping away.
I just want to circle back to I'm sorry about the BIPOC students getting them involved. I would say, as someone that started in the movement as a college student, well, even before then, but a college student, then I came back as an organizer, and now I'm co-chair, is that we have to create spaces for our young people to feel like they're being heard. We don't listen to them enough, and we say we want them involved, and when they do get involved, all we do is take them, speaking of young people, we just ask them to sit there so we can point at them and tell them everything that we know. They don't learn like that. They want to learn from our actions. They want to be given chances. They want to be heard, and they want to be given opportunities. So when I talk about paying them, I mean that, but I also talk about when we get them involved, it's not easy to walk in any organization and just say, look, I got an idea. Will you listen to me? They want you to pay your dues. And what I hate about, and I've been doing nonprofit work for about 25 years, is that people, when you get in there, we start mimicking the corporations and the entities that we're fighting against. We start developing their rules and their Robert's Rules of Order and all that stuff. And sometimes that's alienating, and it pushes people away. And so we have to challenge ourselves to do something different. I think that's one thing that we learned from the Justice from Breonna Taylor movement, like Chantrice talked about. All these groups came up out of there, and they want to do something. They want to be a part of change. It's a lot of gatekeeping here in Louisville, in Kentucky, and I'm sure it's more places. And so it's hard to break in. And so I do think that if you are an organization or a university or a group that has resources, help these groups that don't have the infrastructure that Chantrice and Representative Scott talked about. Help them by helping them get a CPA. So many groups lose funding because they don't have a person to keep their books in order. And then people like me, who I'm always trying to take care of everybody, I can't hire certain people because they're not in the right status and things like that, or they can't get money to their nonprofit or whatever happens in those negotiations. So we need to help people get it together. We need to be willing to say, we got we always go for the law students, but what about some young accountant students? Can they come and help and use their skills to help bring these organizations up to par? I know for the Alliance, we've been around a long time, but we've been on a shoestring budget. And so we have to have someone that is helping us keep those books together. So I think that we all can be doing our part. I think if you want more young people involved, create the space, ask them, don't come with your clipboard full of stuff. Let them tell you what they need and listen to them.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, perfect. So Neely, before you leave, if you want to give some closing remarks, and then I'm going to turn it over to Nubia right after Neely.
Just thank you. That's really all I have to say. Amazing thoughts and calls to action, and a lot that we can do. And I just appreciate being in the room, in the Zoom with everybody.
Thank you so much, Neely, Dr. Bendapudi. I don't probably saying that.
I am so fancy. You can call me anything you want. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to drop off. Really appreciate this. Thank you so much.
So as if there are any other, we do have this Zoom until 7. So if there are any other questions, I want to definitely hold space for additional questions or concerns. I know I at least have a whole bullet list of ways to actually get out here and do some things. I'm really grateful to everybody on this panel for giving these very tangible items of what we can do, because everybody, when we think about action, right, direct action, we always think of, having to go down to Injustice Square Park in the case of Breonna Taylor and everybody else that was harmed before, during, and after that, right? Everybody can't go down to Injustice Square Park, but there is a role for everyone, because these are systems that we are participating in and trying to resist and change at the very same time. So I really think that is so important that we double down on that message in as many ways as possible, because there's something for all of us to do. And I think that for the concluding session of this Becoming Anti-Racist series, like for those of you who've been to every single one or a few of these, we've kept saying, hey, I mean, this is not individual people coming up with a single idea. It may have started that way, but this is actually a network of organizations that are that need more people to do connected work, because it's all of us or it's none of us, or else we'll be having the same conversations for the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years. So I'm just Marian, I'm moving on to just what we're doing next. Okay, just making sure. Really quickly, I just want to share with everyone some resources. We already saw Shamika. These places have been on the list the entire time. And the list has grown from the very beginning. Most of these folks, we've had speakers from one of these organizations. Of course, we had Black Market on there from week 1. And so what I'd like you all to do is take that list that you've created just from this panel, right? And get involved there. I want you to get involved with any and all of these organizations. And this is definitely not an exhaustive list, because like I say, every single time, people have been doing the work the entire time. It's our jobs to tap in and just see where we're needed and see where we can add to the work, because that's really the only way, like Chantry said, like Attica said, like Shamika said, it's the only way for this work to be sustainable. Because if it's dependent on the individuals that are doing the work, then every single time we're going to have to start over from scratch every single time. And if we're dependent on the people who are the loudest in the room, or who are doing this work and their name is on it, they don't get to go out and have fun and take breaks and do all of these things, and we're going to burn them out. And so that's on us, right? That's always on us to really figure out where we can plug in, and where we can create larger networks of people to do this work. So these are just a few. Screenshot this, or whatever you need to do. Take more notes, whatever you need to do. This actually concludes our series. Usually I'm saying, oh, there'll be another one next month, and there's not. We're done here for this one. But like Marion said, we are in the process of figuring out what amazing community organizer is used in the most in the loosest term. Whatever people are out here doing amazing work, they can speak to the work that they're doing, because all of these community conversations are about moving conversation to action. So the people that are on these panels are always people that are already doing the work, and that can just point us in the direction of more work, because we're out here trying to do action. So that'll probably happen in January. You'll start hearing more about these community conversations in January. It'll be based on the book, it's the post-traumatic slave syndrome, right, Marion? And we'll also have a book discussion group as well. So if you're interested in reading the book with us and talking with us about it and coming through action that way, there'll be more information about that. We'll be sending that out to anybody that's ever registered for any of our community conversations. So you don't have to write any dates down. You'll just be seeing my name pop up in your email in about 6 months. But if anybody has anything else to add, Marion, anything you want to add? Nakia, anything you want to add, or any of our panelists?
No, I'm leaving on a very great and energetic note. This was amazing. And funny thing, I know all of them, but every time I walk away, I'm like, ooh, but this was amazing. So no, I have nothing to add. Absolutely nothing.
I think I just want to thank you, Nubia, for leading all of these conversations and bringing this to light. Like, thank you, because this has been truly absolutely wonderful. And so I truly appreciate you allowing the alumni office at U of L to be part of this and join you on this journey. So it's been great.
Aww.
See, Shamika, I know how to get out of the way and let young people do what they need to do.
Yes, you do.
And to that point, I definitely want to thank Marion, and this is going to be just a mushy love triangle at this point, but I want to thank Marion though for letting me lead this, because I came in thinking, oh, okay, yes, boss, what I need to do. She's like, no, this is yours. So there's that. And Nakia for taking my phone calls when I'm like, I don't know what to do. I just been back at U of L since September. And for all of our panelists for the entire time, thank y'all for letting me tell y'all what to do, because y'all know I actually don't like telling people what to do. But and knowing that you all, like, I'm grateful every single session, because I want to see people that are doing the work. Do people usually doing the work don't usually want to talk about it? They just want to do more work. Is usually how that operates. But stopping the work for a second to have these conversations is the work, right? And bringing people together to say, okay, this is how you can plug in, because a lot of times you have to be in the room to know what the next steps are. And so I'm just really excited to continue this space, just so that takes the burden off the people that are doing the work. They said, oh, well, Shamika said, this is how you can get involved with stopping cash bail. Attica said, these are some legislative things that are happening. Chantrese said, this is how you can make sure food gets to people. Then they don't have to say that. So if you all have any, and for you in the audience, if you have any other action things that you have in the community, because the community is always doing the work because they have to, we have to, please share that. Keep in touch so that we can make sure that this is also a space where information is shared, not just top down. Even if we did have the president of the university on this panel, not just top down, but bottom up and in between and everything, because that's the only way we build these networks. But if that is all, anybody else want to say something wishy or sweet to somebody else that's on this panel, I'll hold space for that. But if not, I want to thank everybody for participating in every single way that you can. Please look out for an email from me about ways we can keep this growing and going. And that's it. That's all, folks, like they say in the cartoons. Y'all have a